Namaskar, y'all. Welcome back to Yoga Answers. I'm Brother John, and I'm here to hopefully answer any questions you may have about yoga or meditation. I shot the content for this video yesterday, so you'll notice I'm dressed differently, but I left out a very important part of something I wanted to include in the introduction, and that is a shout out to my subscribers. This channel is brand new. I'm just getting this off the ground, and you're here. And people are already subscribing. They're already finding this information beneficial and helpful. And, I am not a content creator. I am a yogi. I am an educator. That's it, okay? And it is not my intention to badger you to like and subscribe. If you want to do those things, great, because it feeds the algorithm. It's not about me gaining followers. It is about this information being made available to the broadest possible audience. And by you clicking like, clicking subscribe, it triggers the YouTube algorithm, which then, when other people are looking for this type of content, it shows up as an option for them. And so that's the whole goal, is to grow this channel and make this information as widely available as possible. So I want to thank those of you who have subscribed. I want to welcome all of you who are here viewing, whether you're new to this channel or not. What is yoga? What is union with the divine? Why do we need it? How do we do it? And, that's worth investigating. But if it then stems other questions in your mind, or it creates confusion, drop me a comment and ask a question. Okay, that's enough yakking out of me. Let's get into the discussion. I want to give you the yogic perspective of the 4 functioning aspects of the mind and how they create our perception of reality and manifest this existence. The core problem is that we have forgotten the fundamental truth of who we are. And that is what yoga is getting back to that truth. Yoga means union. It comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, meaning to yoke or unite, to bind. And we are uniting the divine, eternal oversoul that created all existence, and all of us little individual souls, right? That we think that we're separate from that, and that divinity and God and goodness and light is out there. And I'm over here alone suffering. And God can't be here because I'm hurting and life is rough. And so definitely he can't be in here. And so yoga is the inward journey. And there's a reason why it's inward, and we're going to get to that in just a second. And it's the inward journey of training the mind. And once we are able to slow the mind, we find ourselves in a state of pure consciousness. And in that state, we are able to have realizations of the self, the divine self. And that word realization is important. It means that what we are perceiving inside is real. We wake up and we understand, oh, this divine self, this consciousness that pervades the heart of all things, is me. There is no separation because there is nothing else. This is the be all end all, and I am that. That is yoga. That is the goal of all the practices. So, if we are this divine being, why don't we remember it? Why did we throw ourselves into this situation of reincarnation, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime of suffering, and not remembering that we're this, divine all? It comes with the experience, okay? It comes with the experience of existing in this physical realm and having sensory experiences and enjoying sense objects. Due to those and the pull for those, we are drawn lifetime after lifetime, and it's what's called the veil of Maya. It's a form of ignorance and forgetting. We want to come back lifetime after lifetime to have these sensory experiences and to enjoy sense objects, and we forget. We forget we're blinded to the reality that we once remembered. So I want you to be very clear here, that I'm not talking about physical yoga, hatha yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, any specific form of yoga. I am talking about the overarching yogic philosophy of Sankhya, and I'm talking about the ideas, the concepts of the mind, and how the mind influences us, and how the mind is the thing to be overcome to attain self-realization. So let's start with the question, why do we need yoga? Why was it given to humanity? When the mind has its way, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, it becomes like the tail wagging the dog. No one's really in control. There is no wisdom. The mind is just reacting to sense objects, lifetime after lifetime, and on and on and on it goes. And so yoga is a discipline. And discipline is only necessary when something has gone awry. Okay? The original nature of human existence wasn't for it to go awry. It's just something that occurs as a human falls prey to Maya, which we all do. So I'm going to read some things, share some passages from the Yoga Sutras and from the Upanishads, so you know that, I'm not trying to say this is my wisdom and that, look how much I know, okay? Anything I know about yoga or meditation, I've learned at the feet of my teachers, and what they have passed on to me has been directly from the Shastras, the holy books of yoga, scriptures, if you would. So I'm going to read the Sanskrit because it's important. Sanskrit has an effect. It's a divine language. I'm practicing it, and so I'm trying to get more practice, but it's also important to hear it in the Sanskrit. And I apologize for my pronunciation. Okay, I'm doing my best, but I'm a hillbilly from the Ozarks, so I've got an accent, and I will try not to let it come out as I'm pronouncing 5,000-year-old words of a dead language. Hatha Yoga Anushasana. Now I will enunciate the discipline of yoga. Why? Why must we have a discipline? Sage Pantanjali goes on. Tada drashtu svarupe avasthana. Abiding in the nature of form, in the nature of the seer, is yoga. Rupa means form, like a physical body, okay? If I, as a being, am abiding in the nature of a form, and yet, at the same time, I am abiding, remaining in the nature of the seer, the one who perceives correctly. That is yoga. That is union. Because the small s self in the body is no different than the capital S divine self in the heart. Okay? So that's what that means. Abiding, this is how we all come into existence. This is where we are kind of returning to in yoga. Abiding in the nature of the form, in the nature of the seer, is yoga. Vritti sarupya mitaratra. Your chitta, or mind stuff, has been engaged and caught up in they're called vrittis, the changing states of the mind, which are driven by the outside world. Your eyes are open, but you have been caught up in all that you have been seeing. You have thus assumed the form of the mind and started believing that it is the real you. All of us go through this. Who knows how many lifetimes ago we made that transition of being enamored with the outside world and forgetting the inner world, the real world, the lasting, changeless, divine within. And we became enamored with this, and we started associating that, oh, I am the mind. I am this form. And thus, all suffering begins. The whole circus takes off. That's why yoga, okay? To counter that. So, how does that happen? How does this outward turning enamorment with the sense objects occur? Yoga is a science. It has broken everything down into explanations. As we move forward into this explanation of the mind, I ask you to keep an open mind, for lack of a better word, and not bring any preconceived notions, medically or psychologically or any other way, into what you believe the mind to be. Okay? We're just strictly going to go with what does yoga philosophy tell us, because we can move forward from there. So when we say consciousness in this discussion, we're not talking about being conscious or unconscious. Okay, we're talking about consciousness as an existing form of being, the ultimate, the substratum of all existence. It's what everything comes from and everything returns to. And it's what connects everything, is consciousness. And the four elements that make up the consciousness within an embodied soul, a jiva, an embodied soul, are the chitta, the memory bank. Chitta means basically, loosely, mind stuff, the stuff that makes up the apparatus of the mind, these four distinct functions. Okay? Chitta also means memory. Specifically, the memory bank that is formed throughout lifetimes and that is carried from one lifetime to the next. It never goes away. My first teacher used to say, the soul is a memory track. It's a memory bank. And every lifetime, it's the memories that are drawing us into a new physical existence, because the memories of sense objects, the memories of sensory experiences are drawing us forward into another physical existence or manifestation. Okay, so chitta, overarching mind stuff, also the memory bank of our existence as an individual Atman. The buddhi, which is known as the discriminating intellect. The ahamkara, which is known as the I maker. It's called the ego, but it's not really the ego the way we think of it in America. And we'll get into that. And then the manas, the mind. Okay? Now, here's where I'm going to ask you to be open-minded. Because, we think the mind is this big cerebral thing that does calculus and figures out how to put a man in the moon and stuff. But in yogic parlance, the manas, the mind, is just the chief sense organ. It is what receives sensory input from sense objects. And that's very important, because I've been saying what keeps drawing us back here is our attraction to sense objects. The entire problem of us feeling like we are ununited from our source begins with that outward turning towards sense objects. And so the manas, the mind, is the chief sense object. Okay, so let's talk about how these four parts of the consciousness work together. And I'm going to show you how, and look, man, you don't have to believe this. You can believe this, you cannot believe this, but I'm going to show you from the scripture, from textual sources. So you may have heard someone say in the past, we manifest our own reality. So that is not a myth. That's, according to yoga, that's the way things work. And if we don't understand that, we cannot undo that and then return back to our source. I often say that, on the path to liberation, nothing needs to be done, only undone. And what needs to be undone is our ego, our ahamkara. That is the part of consciousness. It's called the I maker. It's the part that says I, me, mine. And it distinguishes this portion of consciousness, this embodied jiva, as separate. And all of the ills of humanity begin with the ahamkara. Because once I can say, I am not you, then I can consider you an enemy. I can hold resources from you in times of famine and woe, because I have to protect mine, my family, right? I, me, and mine. The Upanishads talk over and over about the ego cage of I, me, and mine, and that we must break free of it. That is the ultimate hurdle that is preventing us seeing truly. Okay? So yoga is about undoing the ahamkara, because that is the portion of the consciousness that continues to spurn the memory function of the chitta, okay, into this oneness, right? The chitta has a memory, and this I says, I want to go experience that. I want to go experience that. The divine being is already experiencing it. There is no need for it to separate itself to go experience it. The divine being is everything. So all he has to do is sit and experience himself. Same with us. So let me share this with you. This prove what I'm talking about, okay? That, and this is going to sound kind of crazy because it's not logical, but I didn't say the inward path was going to be logical. It works beyond the function of the mind. We have to get beyond the mind and beyond words to consciousness. And the reality we perceive in consciousness is not necessarily the same as what we see here, okay? So this is from the Katha Upanishad. It's section 3, verse 10. This is listing in backwards order of how we come to be manifested away from the divine self, the thing I was just talking about, okay? How do we come to forget that we are that and become this thing that we think is limited and small and separate? This is going to, it's like reverse engineering, okay? These senses derive from objects of sense perception. Sense objects from mind, mind from intellect, and intellect from ego. Ego from undifferentiated consciousness, and consciousness from Brahman, the unmanifested supreme reality. Brahman is the first cause and the last refuge. Brahman, the hidden self in everyone, does not shine forth. He is revealed only to those who keep their minds one pointed on the Lord of love, thus developing a superconscious manner of knowing. Meditation enables them to go deeper and deeper into consciousness, from the world of words to the world of thoughts, then beyond thoughts to wisdom in the self. Okay, so let's look at that again. And I'm going to reread it, the beginning, just the beginning part, because, like I said, it's reverse engineering. So it doesn't really explain how we come to be manifested, okay? The senses derive from objects of sense perception. Sense objects from the mind, manas. So what it's saying right there is that the objects, these sense objects that we see in the world, trees, oranges, right? Puppy dogs, cheeseburgers, they are derived. They come into being. They are drawn from our mind. Okay? Our manas, our chief sense organ. The mind is derived from intellect, the buddhi, and the function of the buddhi is to discriminate. It takes in the information from the mind, right? The mind, in the yogic sense, the manas, just is the chief sense organ. It just takes in the information from the senses. It doesn't make any decisions about it. That is the function of the intellect. It discriminates, like, don't like, don't like. Okay? But then the intellect is derived from the ego, the ahamkara. And the ahamkara, the I maker, is the one that says, I don't like the smell of gardenias. I like the smell of curry. And it is the ahamkara that does one of the most dangerous things for a human being seeking liberation or enlightenment. The ahamkara constantly defines us. We are constantly defining ourselves. I'm a Democrat, right? Whatever. I'm a father. I'm a musician. I'm a veteran. I'm a daughter. Whatever. Okay? I have this sexual orientation. I have this political belief. I have this philosophical association. What do all of those sentences begin with? I. The ahamkara. Every time we define ourselves, we are reinforcing the ahamkara. We are reinforcing that we are this small, limited bag of bones and brain and dextrose that's gonna be worm food eventually, and we are nothing more than that. Okay? And the ahamkara just reinforces that every time we define ourselves. So one of the ways of undoing the ego is doing our best to not define ourselves, to try, if we can, to become one amongst the many. And then, if we can, to become the many. Because there is no separation. So, the ahamkara, okay, the ego, in the West, we think of ego as someone who thinks highly of themselves or thinks that they're very important, right? And we say he's got a big ego. Or if he's humble, we'd say, yeah, he's cool. He doesn't really have an ego. He didn't have an ego about the whole thing. This ego is different, okay? This is a whole different philosophical concept. It's just the Sanskrit term, ahamkara, gets translated into ego, but really ahamkara, I maker, is a much more effective term because that explains what it does. And ego is confusing, okay? Ego, the ahamkara, stems from undifferentiated consciousness. Us little disembodied or embodied jivas, separate souls, we perceive ourselves to be differentiated, separate from the underlying consciousness. And the best metaphor I've ever heard is, imagine if all you've ever known in your life was being a raindrop and you are just falling. You're falling through the air and below you is the ocean, and it's scary and it's exhilarating, and you came from a cloud up there and the sun is shining and you're barreling down towards this inevitable plunge into you don't know what. And yet when the raindrop hits the ocean, it just blends into the ocean and becomes water until the chitta kicks in and starts remembering sense objects and starts having those desires to exist and enjoy them. And then just as through the force of, I believe it's convection, warm air draws water up out of the ocean into the clouds. And then you fall again as a raindrop in another life. And the process continues. But it is that merging into the water, into the ocean, and returning to the source of everything. That's the goal of yoga, right? We are trying to be able to see truly, like it said, right? We came in abiding in the form and abiding in the nature of the seer. But from looking outward too long, we came to believe and identify with the mind and believe that that is what we were. And we forgot our true nature. So here we see it is the ego that separates us from undifferentiated consciousness. It is the ego that separates us from the ocean. Okay? So think about that. Think about how the functions of the mind, according to yoga, cause us to exist. And if they can cause us to exist, then we can control our existence. Peace. Now, this is a prayer that I often end emails with, and I'm going to share it because we're coming to an end here, and it's apropos. May all know peace. May all know love. May all know joy. May all know they are the divine light within all living things. Om Shanti.